Well, it's a pleasure to be here, everybody. Those words were very special to me and meaningful. When Frank Zarrow asked me to speak, he said to me, part of what this is about is restorative justice. And I said, well, okay, let me think about that. I have a murder conviction. I killed somebody. It's almost incongruous, in a sense, in that there is no restoration when someone's life is taken. You can't go to status quo ante. Now, the same, by a parity of reasoning, the same applies to an innocent person who's wrongfully convicted. You put that person in jail 15, 20 years. There's no restoring. So, in a sense, it's a little bit of it's problematic, the notion of restorative, when you have crimes of violence. And I think that becomes part of the disconnect in our society about how we should treat people and offenders. Let me say that with the notion of you can't go back and undo it, the question then becomes, what do we do for going forward? Okay? I'm going to tell you my proposition, and it's based on a lifetime of being involved in prison and out of prison and still working with people that are in trouble all the time, is that rehabilitation primarily, and I'm talking about for the person that's done something wrong, and I'll talk later about this notion about how prosecutors overcharge and how, in fact, in life, as in most things, truth is in the middle. And prosecutors overcharge because they use that as leverage to get people to plead guilty, okay? Where innocent people will even plead guilty because they're so afraid of the threat of an onerous conviction because they've been overcharged by a prosecutor, which we know they can indict a ham sandwich. Sal Wackler told us that years ago, right? But rehabilitation, primarily, the elements in my estimation are, number one, you accept responsibility for your actions. You don't place the blame on others, okay? Number two, rehabilitation, in my estimation, is genuine remorse. I'm talking about the person who's done something wrong. You got to be sorry. If you're not sorry, then it's not working. You're not taking the responsibility. Now, with these premises in mind, that it's all about not shifting the blame or blaming others in society and everything like that. And you know what? A lot of times there are societal influences that have an impact. You know, I've had clients that the mother was a crackhead, the father was a junkie, that were broken up families, and never had a fair shake. I just had a kid who had 33 years, and I was able to get it reversed and cut it down to 12, where he was born with both feet backwards. His mother sent him to England to have his legs, his feet, he was a short guy, one leg 6 inches shorter than the other. This kid wanted to belong so bad. He wanted to be a part of something so bad that he wound up joining the Bloods, street gang, the Bloods. He can't fight. He's got no big toe. On both feet, he's missing the big toe, which is the balance toe. He got involved in something he shouldn't have been involved in, and the system did him wrong. The system did him wrong because he was a victim from his birth. So there are those situations, but go back. It's all about taking the responsibility and having genuine remorse. When you have remorse, if you've done something wrong, okay, then rehabilitation's in the offing. Now, here's my proposition with respect to that. I believe that the inmates, the way our system works is that society says we have this notion of when a crime has been committed, the person cannot have contact with the victim, okay? It's the notion of vengeance is mine, so to speak, all right? Because we don't want eye for eye. I mean, we're in a place of worship, so I'll use a little biblical in connotations here. incantations. But the notion is that we're not allowed to take justice in our own hands. But what I'm saying is that becomes an excuse for people when we're in prison, and I was there, and it was always us and them, and it was them, and it was them as if them was something not us. Okay? I think what's important is for offenders to be connected to the victims. I think what's important is for offenders to be made to be aware of the suffering that they've caused to people's families and to their own families. And I think that what we need are programs that, in fact, make the offender do things that, whether it's even some of his commissary, a small amount of money, or whether it's he does something, some deeds that connects him back with the persons he's harmed. And the reason for that is because, first of all, if the victim is willing, it allows the victim to forgive, which means something. It also allows the offender, it prevents that person from escaping the responsibility and saying us and them, and we almost, in a sense, when I was there, and I did it too, we effectively try to dehumanize the victim in a sense that we try to act like it did, that wasn't a person that we hurt. And when we are forced to be cognizant of the pain and suffering that we've caused, it forces us to become in touch with our humanity, that we can't run from it, that we can't run from the feelings. Now, I'll tell you this. This is the notion that basically goes back to we are our brother's keeper in the Bible, that we all have a responsibility to each other, and that if there were programs that would instill a sense of responsibility, that the offender has for the harm he's caused or she has caused to the victim and society at large, to that extent, I believe you heal the offender. I think that the person becomes reconnected, that the person then can feel like when he comes back, he's coming into something that's a part of him or her, and that it's not an alien thing, that you're coming back into this, again, this monolithic them or thing out there, and you're not connected to it. It's very important for ex-offenders to be connected. And I think that to the extent that we do that as a society, we almost cause ourselves to have to acknowledge the efforts and the give back, so that, you know what, we should open up our hearts a little bit more to them. How many people I know, fine craftsmen in so many industries and professions and vocations, they can't get jobs because of incidents in their lives. Everybody's holier than thou until they're in trouble. I used to love to see all the politicians and stuff come to jail. They were like the real conservatives. Then they get arrested and something happens because they're sniffing cocaine or whatever, and now everybody's a liberal. It's really kind of funny how that goes. All right, but it is what it is. But what I'm saying, and I'm going to talk to you about a few biblical examples. But the offender needs to feel the pain. And I will tell you that when you are sorry for what you've done, depending upon the degree of severity, for something like that I did, I always feel the pain. Okay? So remorse for me is something that's never goes away. It's something that's always there. But it's something that you have to feel and accept to really want to grow. And these are my notions of when you're a guilty person. I'm not talking about the innocent person. I'm not talking about that. And there are innocent people that are convicted. I mean, we know Barry Scheck has the Innocence Project, the DNA. They've exonerated many people, including with confessions, and the National Academy of Sciences. They just came up with a two-volume treatise last 2 years ago debunking half of the scientific theories that we rely on with respect to fingerprint analysis and ballistics analysis and so many other techniques that are scientifically flawed, absolutely flawed, that so many people have been convicted on. I just won a case that in the U.S. Court of Appeals, Rivas versus Fisher. It was the first time that the United States Court of Appeals has recognized a colorable claim of actual innocence as a basis to file a late habeas corpus petition. And that case involved a corrupt medical examiner that I fought for 4 years. I appealed the case twice to the United States Court of Appeals because he was convicted on the basis of fabricated evidence by a medical examiner up in Syracuse, New York. And the battle is still on. But I'm not talking about the possible innocent cases. I'm talking for the moment about the person who did a bad act, which was most of the guys in jail. You know, it may not be what he's been convicted of, but many times I would say the vast majority of people are in jail for committing crimes, okay? So, we need to acknowledge, we need to feel the pain, we need to connect our humanity to the victims, and we need programs that take us in that direction. Now, some people will say, well, let's just talk about the victim, and, you know, these guys commit these crimes, they can't change, all right? They're not going to change, they're animals, they're no good. Well, you know, good and evil are really two sides of the same coin, aren't they? You can't have good if you don't have evil, right? And if you believe in God, doesn't that ineluctably make you have to realize that God even created evil? Don't want to think of that maybe, but it's true. And why I say that is because the Bible is about a recognition that people can change, okay? Just like you don't know, what is justice? We're here talking about justice. It's a big word. What is it? It's quite irrational, isn't it? Isn't justice a feeling? And how do you determine it? But don't you determine it by its converse? Don't you really determine justice by injustice? Isn't it when you take the ice cream cone from the little kid and you give it to and the kid sees you give it to another kid, and the kid knows, 3 years old, knows that's not fair, that's not right? Now, this notion of can people change, it goes back to the Bible. In the Bible, there was no bigger creep than Jacob to what he did to his brother Esau. Okay? Remember, his brother was starving in the desert, and he comes from the desert and he says, I'm starving, please, I'm going to die, feed me. And he says, okay, I'll feed you, but give me your birthright. Well, you know, right now that's the whole big issue in Palestine, right? And you know, that the whole issue was whether that birthright that he gave up, you know, which was part of that birthright was the land of you know, Israel. In contract law today, under those circumstances, there'd be an issue as to whether that's a contract of adhesion, whether it was even legally enforceable. Okay, and then it doesn't stop. And then Jacob goes on. Remember the little scam he does when the father's going to die and he's blind? And Jacob, and he's in cahoots with his mother because mommy likes Jacob. She doesn't really like Esau so much because Esau went out and started hanging out with these other chicks in another tribe, and she wasn't too thrilled with that. So what happens is he comes back and he pretends that he is Esau, right? And what was the purpose of this? The father says, Esau, go out and get me some things, and bring them back to me, and I'm going to give you a blessing, my blessing, because he knows he's going to die. Meanwhile, it was Jacob that did that, and Jacob was pretending that he was Esau because the father was blind, and he wanted the father's blessing. So here is a guy that is a real bad guy, but yet this is Israel. Jacob is the one who wrestles with the angel Gabriel and overcomes the angel to get to God. Okay? He's the father of Judaism. which is the basis of Christianity. So now we move to Christianity. And who's the main man before, Jesus Christ, obviously, but who's the main man after Christ? The butcher Saul, who becomes St. Paul. The killer Saul, who was a bad guy. Even Islam with Mohammedanism. Muhammad was a warrior. He was a butcher. He was a killer. And then he heard the word of God. So in all of these religions, it's the notion that we accept, as the rabbis say, we take our prophets, warts and all. It's that you can change and people can change. So this notion of, well, they're animals and they can't change, should we buy into that? Well, if we buy into that, then I think we've basically thrown away 3,000 years of belief and traditions. So I believe that it's worth making the efforts to connect people to the humanity, to connect people to their societies and their communities. Another thing I believe we need in terms of, obviously we're discussing here looking for practical solutions to real life problems. We need a different clemency process. We need a clemency process that's based on panels of people, not just corrections and not just parole authorities. We need clemency bureaus, a clemency bureau that represents the community, diverse aspects of the community, because there are a lot of people that have acknowledged their guilt and have done everything in the world they can for a break and can't get a break because it's a process that's so involved with political nonsense. Okay? I knew a guy, did nothing. His mother worked for the Secretary of State somewhere back in the Cuomo administration, some organization up there. He got clemency. Another person, a drug case. Another person the relatives were big in Suffolk County politics. He got clemency. I saw hundreds of other guys who had done 10 times as much, couldn't even get a hearing, couldn't get a clemency hearing. Now, why do we need this? One of the things is that, as I said before, the prosecutors generally overcharge when they indict. They do that because it's leverage. They do that because they're going to charge you with something you shouldn't be charged with. But that way, the pain of conviction is so scary that you're going to take a deal, a compromise deal. Now, there are some people that say, you know what? I'm not going to go for that deal because what you're offering me is I didn't do it, number one, maybe, or perhaps I did something, but it wasn't that, which is more likely than not. Well, that person goes to trial, and the juries ordinarily convict, right? What's the conviction rate? 95%? So, because what a jury says is, well, if he did that, he probably did that. And, if he's guilty, he's probably guilty of the whole thing. And guess what? If I have to deliberate too long, I'm out of here. Let's get this over. Let him go to jail. That happens quite often. And for those situations, there is, the appellate courts are very stingy with their interest of justice jurisdiction. New York State has the power, their appellate courts have the power to modify convictions. But they very rarely do it. It's a very rare instance that they do it. And if you depend on that, you might as well hold your breath. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So you need these panels. The first offenders. Andrew before spoke about the statistics of persons. The recidivism is less when you have mandatory sentences. Well, I'll tell you why. Because you take first offenders and you hit them with these harsh sentences. Generally speaking, a lot of these first offenders could learn and would never come back to jail if you gave them half the time that you're giving them. okay, with respect to first offenders. These kids go to jail with these onerous sentences, and it's like you're destroying kids. I knew a kid who, drug addicts, which, 90% of, probably I would say 85 to 90% of the people in jail, it's either drugs or alcohol, right, or mental illness, right, which is so undiagnosed. Right? But he shoots a guy. What happens is he goes to a bar, he goes to rob the bar, he's got a shotgun, totally out of control. Guy grabs the gun, he pulls back, he's scared, he's looking to run out because he's drunk, and he gets shot and dies. Kid's so scared, he says, oh my God, what did I do to this guy? What did I do to my life? He goes and joins the Navy because now he's saying, I want to undo this. I don't want this. I want to undo this. But he can't undo it. It's done. But he goes to jail for 25 years. And he gets convicted, 25 years. They make him, he was 17 years old. He goes, does 25. They make him do 32 years. He keeps, I'll talk to you about the parole board. They keep hitting him and hitting him. He's got bachelor's degree because he started when we were in there, when the facilities, when education was a viable option in prison. Went and worked towards a master's degree. He did everything right. Was in all started programs. Was very instrumental in a lot of positive things, and probably the best maximum security prison in the state of New York, which was Nappaneck, as far as at least when I was there. And so, 32 years for one incident in his life, and I'm not saying you can't change it, and people will say, but what about the person you killed? Yeah, and he did 25 for that, and that was the sentence of the court. And then they keep hitting him and hitting him and hitting him. And guess what? This kid would have been rehabilitated had he done 10, 12 years. He didn't need 33 years. Okay? He was actually rehabilitated when he went and joined the Navy. But I understand. Life was taken. It was on the news today. There was some guy in one of these Scandinavian countries who killed 70 people and was sentenced to 10 years. Okay? Now, I'll even mention Mark Chapman, the one who killed John Lennon. Now, I know a lot of people. This is the age group when the Beatles were big, so a lot of you. But he was sentenced. He pled guilty to 20 to life. Okay. Now let's assume, we know he was mentally ill, right? I mean, isn't that obvious? He was mentally ill. But, we have a standard that says that irresistible impulse is not a sufficient basis upon which to claim insanity. You must not be able to appreciate or understand the legality of your actions. But the guy was crazy. But nevertheless, he does 20 years, which was the sentence, I believe that was the sentence he pled to. And they keep hitting him, and now he's got 32 years in. Okay? And he's been a model prisoner in there. Now, I know, we have a saying in the law that hard cases make bad law. Because when you get a case where there's no sympathy, you don't want to do the right thing. I should back up, that's a loaded statement. You don't want to fairly look at the case, okay? This is the problem with the parole board. The problem with the parole board is that it's so arbitrary and capricious in what they do. It's such an unprincipled body that I'm jumping a little bit here, but I was going to tell you that my estimation is they should go to the federal system and do away with the parole board, because I don't think they have any principled basis upon which they make their decisions. In fact, the legislature just passed law this year that specifically provided they had to force the board to recognize rehabilitation as a basis for granting parole. That you can't just look at the seriousness of the offense, which is it's their mantra. Seriousness would depreciate the seriousness of the offense in the eyes of the community. That's what they say in every case. It's so boilerplate. If you laid out 100 parole hits, denials, they'd all say the same thing. So now the legislature has finally caught on. It's about 40 years, but that's how it usually works, about 40 years. And so now they're supposed to look at the person's rehabilitative efforts. But the system's still going to fail because they're going to still ignore it. I believe that the parole board I believe we need a clemency bureau that actually functions, that works, and we need to do away with parole. I'm here to give you my take on things. I don't even do parole appeals because I think that there's such a waste of time. I feel bad taking people's money. I think that they're hopeless. And Ed Hammock's my dear friend. I love him. He'll be here tomorrow. And I've worked with him. And he'll tell you it's very hard. They're very, very difficult dealing with parole. Now, a lot of people ask me, and this has been, several people have asked me, the $64,000 question, Rich, is like, how did you do it? How did you get admitted to the bar with a murder conviction? It was a journey. It was a real labor. I'll tell you some general things, and then I'll tell you the specifics of what I did. First of all, I acknowledged I killed somebody, so I never avoided that. I remember when I got convicted and the jury came back second-degree murder, and they brought me into the bullpens, and I'm looking at the cell in the bar, and I'm saying, what did you do with your life? I remember saying those words to myself, looking out the bars. What did you do to yourself? Then I remember that at first I was so naive. I was a drug addict, high school dropout, just a stupid kid. And then I got the brief. I saw the brief that was done for me by a lawyer, which my parents, my mother was there. And, I'm going home. This is a home run. I'm going home, reading. I'm showing my friends. And, yeah, I'm going home. I'm out of here. I'm ready to give my stuff away, So I remember I saw the DA's opposition, and it looked, okay, it looks good, but I'm going home. My brief is better. Meanwhile, I'm this ignorant kid. So I will tell you this. When I got denied, I remember being so angry at myself. I said, you're the dumbest dude in the world. I said, you're not. I was mad at myself for being so ignorant. And I said to myself, you know what? You're not going to be ignorant anymore. So I put it in my mind that I was going to educate myself, because I was not going to be so out of control. I mean, I was obviously in prison. You don't have much control, but I wanted to gain control of my life. So I got a GED, went to college programs, and this is one of the sad things that's happened. I was in prison in the 70s after the Attica riot. So rehabilitation was in people's minds, and we had programs. We had great college programs, I mean, really. And I remember some corrections officers saying, why are you guys getting this? If my kids have to pay for an education, Those are hard things to counter, sentiments to counter, except by saying, going back to what Andrew had said earlier, something about $59,000 a year to put people in prison. I think that that's a pretty good salary, isn't it? So I think that the benefit of education is on so many levels. It makes people sometimes, sometimes they do it because they think they work in the system, because it's going to help them get parole. But then all of a sudden you start seeing lights go on. And now it's just not about working the system. Now it's about, wow, maybe I could do something. I'll never forget a friend of mine, Jerry. He had a fight in the yard. And he hit a guy with his, I don't know what he did, but he went to the box for a year. They put him in for a year. So he came out about 10 months later, and I thought he was Socrates. He had read every philosophy book, and all he was talking was philosophy and Socrates, and I'm saying, where did you come from? I couldn't believe it. This was a guy who was a gangbuster. I mean, this guy was a tough guy in the yard. He was known as a tough guy. And he said, you know what? He had changed. Now, he changed after 10 months in solitary, but he was In other words, he changed from education, not solitary confinement. That's a very horrible place. But the point is that there were so many of us. There were so many of us that got educations in there that came out, and our lives were so different. That we did so many good things because we had the opportunities to do good things that they've taken away from so many people. It's heart-wrenching. The thing that keeps you going in prison are two things. You've got to have something on your mind positive all the time. For me, I live my life, there's 3 parts of a day, morning, afternoon, and night. Every day of my life, except for one day on the weekend when I would go to a movie, every day of my life was either in a classroom, studying, right, or working out. That's what I did. My days were always split to those 3 things. That's what I did every day. And it kept my mind focused, out of negativity. And then the other thing I always had was hope. You know, there's a famous psychiatrist who was in Auschwitz. I don't know if it was Fritz Perls, but somebody who, Frankl, who said the most important thing to survive is hope. And that is so true in prison. Patrice, my wife, is here with me. She works with me as my paralegal. And she's the best because when they call her, she's right there for them. And, you know, we go overboard to help our clients because we're not only doing law work, we're trying to help them, you know, in their lives because it's such a hardship. But I have clients or people that were my clients that I still try to help in little ways. I'll send them cases, et cetera, where they're filing their 4th 440 motion because they're just grabbing for straws, but they need something to hope. They need hope, you know, when it's a hopeless situation. That's why we need clemency for people that even when the courts fail them, that at least there's some possibility there for them later on. So I'm just going to conclude by you know, what was special for me was I never blamed anyone for what I did. I was raised by a mother who was uneducated, single family, broken family, the whole deal, but always taught me that I could do anything I want to do. I believed that, stupidly, but goodly. I believed that I could do anything I want to do, and she raised me to believe that. One of the things I rejected in there was I went in and I had just turned 18 years old. I wasn't a gangster. I wasn't I had no past history of criminality in that I wasn't a burglar. I wasn't a stick-up guy. I didn't have a trade, okay? I didn't have a specialty. But I knew that I didn't want to be that. I rejected right away the self-fulfilling prophecy of I'm a convict. And I had people tell me that. You're a convict. What are you doing? You got a murder conviction. What are you doing with that? When I came out and worked as a paralegal, and I did it for years, people told me that we're doing other things. They're never going to let you be a lawyer. What are you wasting your time? You're just spinning your wheels. Forget that. So I never bought into the convict mentality. I just refuse. Always refused to. Early on, and I tell this to my kids, I came up with a statement that I live by, and that is every person can make their own destiny to the extent that they can change their environment. And even in prison, I stood away from, there's all kinds of bad things you can do in there. You know, there's drugs, there's gambling, there's all kinds of crap. I avoided it. I avoided it all. I studied, and there were other guys like me. There were plenty of us, you know, but I just avoided the nonsense because I didn't want to be a part of it. I didn't want to get caught up in it. Not that I didn't have any beefs. I had some problems, fights, and, you know, but you got to fight. You know, that's the way it is. But again, the benefits I had the blessing of being in Nappaneck, which was at a time when education was there, and you could change, and you could really come out prepared to work and do something back then. Another big thing I tell anybody who's going to come out, you know, we come out so insecure because we've been hung up so bad. And we come out doubting ourselves and you know, and angry at ourselves and angry at the world sometimes. But I always associated myself with people that were smarter than me, that were doing better than me, and that could teach me, because I have learned that people love to teach. And if you ask somebody who really knows something, hey, could you show me that? They will show you, and they will teach you. And when you ask people of success, people that are doing better than you, hey, can you help me out? You'd be surprised how many times people will help you out. But you got to look up and not look down. That's really, you got to try to be around people that are positive, that you can learn positive things from. Because look, when I came out, I had spent my whole life in jail. I came out at 33. I didn't know anything. I didn't know about relationships. I didn't know about, you know, even you know, the etiquette in a fine dining or something like. I had no idea. All these things. I needed help. I needed a partner. I needed people. So this takes you to the next point of how important it is to have family and a network of support for growth. Whether it's outreach programs, you know, some of us aren't blessed to have family when we come out. And that breaks my heart for so many guys in that situation and girls. Because support is a very important piece of successful reintegration, both financial support and emotional support. So there needs to be systems in place that help people when they get out of jail, that they can make it back in. And that's about what I had to say.
In terms of a master's degree, I used to be a teacher. I owned several successful businesses. Now I can't even get a job sweeping the floor for the most part. I'm either overqualified or I have a conviction. Okay, and I'm a first-time offender also. He talked about programs to connect you with the victims. There was something called Victims Awareness Program where they taught us to feel the pain and sometimes hooked us up with the victim's family. Guess what? It was canceled. The state dropped it. A network program where we lived in a community. We cleaned our own block area. I have a background in finance as well as teaching, so I taught certain programs. Other people had specialties in things, and we taught ourselves education. Guess the recidivism rate for network was almost zero. Guess what? They did away with network. In college, what happened to it in most maxes? They did away with college. Is it on purpose to keep a permanent underclass? I don't know. I got to know in 21 years maybe 2,000 men well. And I worked in the law library along with Chaplain Karen in the chaplain's office, the grievance office, and the classroom. And I saw a lot of cases pass through. So many guys don't live up to what he says, take responsibility. I did it. I was wrong. My reasons are my excuses, but they're still not right. I don't have the right to kill anybody else, period. All right? But in my years, I've met a lot of guys, but I meet 4 of them, and I leave them behind that are innocent. And they've done everything in court and practically bankrupt their families, and we can't help them. Sheila's husband writes books, starts programs, wins awards, goes to clemency. They cancel her, they say no. There's not a reason in the world to say no to her husband. We do need, if you will, a clemency board that are non-police, non-sheriff, but rather someone from the church, someone from the neighborhood business association that may want to hire somebody that knows how to fix something. Everything he said was spot on, and all I could say is, thanks still for fighting for the guys.
Thank you.
I have a son who's incarcerated for 25 years, first offense. And I know at least 15 other kids from my area that are in prison for at least 8 years or better. You've been in there. How do you answer their questions when they say things are happening, like they see things that aren't right? I mean, they're human, and some people are being mistreated. I mean, how do you answer them? They can't even get the mail out sometimes when things happen inside these prisons. And I know you've been there, you've probably seen some things or know some things. I've heard.
There are two things that I would do. First, if you have prisons legal services in the facility, in the area, you stay in touch with the prisons legal services, and you have family members call the prisons legal services. Number two, maybe the camera should be off, but Corrections hates the Commission on Corrections.
Yeah, I've seen that
Okay.
already.
They hate the Commission on Corrections, all right, because they're a watchdog group, okay? And I will tell you this. I do a lot of federal work, and if there is real evidence of mistreatment, you bring it to the local U.S. Attorney's office, because they don't hold hostages. They don't care who they go after. That's the beauty of the system.
U.S. Attorney does?
Yeah, but first, that's the, I mean, you really have to have the smoking gun to go to them, because they're not just going to grab anything. They never love to, they hate to lose, so they don't take a case unless they think they can win it, That's the way they work. But I would go to Commission on Corrections. I would contact Prisoners Legal Services, his family, and you let them know that the family's there watching and tell them what's going on. But again, you've got to. Sometimes you have to let the dust settle on things, because I've been in situations a lot of times where it becomes egos between, could be me and a corrections officer, and I just don't like him, and he doesn't like me, and he's working the unit, and you gotta, sometimes you just gotta let things settle down, depending upon what's going on. I don't know the specifics, but sometimes it is that way. Sometimes it is that your pride, my pride as the inmate, is being hurt because I think you're disrespecting me in some way, you're giving somebody better treatment, or whatever it could be. Look, there's a lot of tension, there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of paranoia and anxiety. We're all living for a visit. You're living for a package. The smallest things can set you off unless you really got your mind focused on the things that I'm talking about. Like, when I was there, it's easy for me to talk in a sense, because when I was there were all these programs that were available to us that could really, you could stay hooked up in the college program and have your mind swimming in knowledge all day long. These kids, or men and women, don't have that. It's really, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. We talk about it, Patrice and I, all the time. And, because I get guys that write to me that they're brilliant. And these were junkies on the street, man. We were all, high school, grade school dropouts. They're brilliant. And, self-taught. And what they could really do, if they had the opportunity. They could do so much. It's just... But, we're in an economy now that everything is rough, and so they're the least... They're the super minority. They've got no word, no voice in any of these, halls of Congress or the legislatures. So, you know, who cares about them? Even though proportionately, we're in a time now where I think there's less violence than there's been in a long time. Notwithstanding the recent shootings, but those are isolated events. But you know, as a statistical matter, I think that we have far less. They've closed a number of facilities in New York State because the prison population has dropped down significantly. You know, but those are issues I can only tell you go to corrections and PLS.
Thank you.
She needs the mic. You want to take this one?
Pardon my ignorance, but you were speaking about a different kind of clemency hearing. What is it now? What do you envision as a different, what would make it different? What could make it different?
Well, my understanding of clemency, and I believe it's still the same from when I was in there, it's pretty much, it's a division, it's a bureau, it's a room down the hall in the division of parole. Okay, it's a function of parole, which now I believe is all under corrections, but because they changed the structure somewhat. But the legislature still is keeping a separation. The problem is, you have an executive director of the Executive Clemency Bureau. It's one person. You have a couple of lawyers in there and a few functionaries who they evaluate these clemency applications as they come in, which are numerous. Okay, so you've got 2 or 3 public servants who are working for the Division of Parole that are doing the evaluation and deciding if they're going to pass on the applications. They make these summaries, and the ones that they think that are viable, those are the ones that they pass on to the Governor's Council. So you got to get past the Executive Clemency Bureau before you even get to the Governor's Council. And, you know, these individuals are preparing the reports and you know, they're framing the issues, basically. They're framing the portrayal. They're coloring the view. You know, the Governor's Counselor is only one guy or one girl, one lady. It's not a, you know, and so what I say is you need a real separate department that has authority, that the clemency applications go to them. They have investigative authority. They have the authority to subpoena, which the Clemency Bureau does, it's my understanding. And this diverse group that are not solely connected to the Bureau of the Parole Board, now connected to the Department of Corrections, can make an independent, more fair evaluation as to the eligibility or the you know, the appropriateness of clemency.
At what part does that come in?
You got to serve half the sentence before you're eligible.
Richard, I want to thank you for sharing today some of the things that only those of us who have been incarcerated behind the wall or behind the double fence can pretty much attest to and identify with, especially when you spoke of the hope, keeping something in your mind. Viktor Frankl, I love Frankl. What was it? Creating beyond your present circumstance. And I can say that looking at the title here, Restoring Justice in America, as a formerly incarcerated individual who has gone through so much, I say restoring justice within myself. I see myself as being America and being able to, as Covey would say in The Eighth Habit, find your voice and inspire someone else to find theirs. So I really appreciate the fact that you were able to uncover some topics. And it's phenomenal, and I applaud you, because until today, I learned that through perseverance, and I'm sure that that's exactly what you had to do. And with so much writing, I had no idea that once you had a felony that you could actually become an attorney. And it's a beautiful thing, and again, I applaud you for that, because if I didn't learn anything else during this weekend, I learned that you can, to any degree, and I thank you for sharing that with me.
Thank you, my man. Tell me, did you get married while your husband was doing life sentence?
25 to life, yes. We got married while he's incarcerated.
Well, you know I changed that law, right?
Yes, I do. I read your bio. Yes, he made it
I got
possible.
you. I let that happen.
Thank you.
That's right.
You are a success story. And my question is this. Given all that you've done, all that you've achieved, do you ever, to this day, ever experience the stigma of incarceration?
Well, that's a good one. Every day, on some level. But at this point, it's kind of like being black. Yeah, I've even said kiss my black a couple of times. Yeah, yeah. I will tell you. I do. In the office the other day, I'm in a law office, I'm sharing space with some guys, and everything's on the internet, so one of my decisions were involving me, an appeal that I lost was on the internet. So, and when you plug in, if you put in my name, you'll see it like it's the fourth thing that comes up, because, how you get moved up on the internet is the number of hits on it. So everybody hears about me as hitting, and they want to know about the conviction. They don't care about how many appeals I've won. They want, let me find out about this guy's case, So, look, that is what it is. I deal with the U.S. attorneys a lot, the judges, the DAs, FBI, DEAs. I used to feel great trepidation, the shame, the guilt, I'm going to be looked down on. But I've learned to like let it go. I've learned to what? If the president can't, if the president doesn't win, if he can be the president with 60% of the votes and 40% of the people say no to him, well then there's no reason why I need to have 100% of the people like me either. So my attitude, there was an old retired, when I first got admitted to the bar, a real sage, old guy, not a lawyer, just a businessman, he said to me, I said, it's kind of funky because now I got to feel like to fight the government, with my background, like I'm always a target, And he says, but Richie, he says, you can't think like that. Remember this. I mean, of course, anything can happen in life, but you can't be afraid of that. Just don't do anything wrong, and nothing bad's going to happen. And that's how I live my life. I live my life being real squeaky clean, because when I got to tell an FBI agent to kiss my butt, or you're a liar, it's not a bad thing. Okay? And, if you got to stand up for your clients and you got to fight, that's what you do. So I have learned not to need to be friends with everybody. But I will tell you this, and as strange as it is, I have found some wonderful people in the judiciary. They're not all bad. And I have gotten a lot of support. I mean, it was judges that let me be a lawyer. It was the first time in New York history. I mean, I did a lot of things to do it. I started a clinic for poor people with landlord-tenant court, and helping them get. I volunteered doing taxes for the IRS. I was knocked down 2 times. It took me 6 years after I passed the bar exam before they let me practice law. So it was a battle, but I never gave up. Never gave up. And I know I opened the door for other people. But they let me in when they could have shut me down. And till this day, I will tell you that I get big respect from the judges. Because I win a lot of cases, but I think I do it on the merits. But I think I get the respect because they know how hard I had to work to get there. I had to work twice as hard as everybody else. When I got knocked down from the bar exam, what did I do? When I got knocked down for the bar, I went back to law school. I went back, and I got an advanced law degree, an LLM degree. Because I figured, well, if I can't be a lawyer, I'll teach. So I got it in commercial law and taxation. So it makes me good at white-collar law. But I worked so hard, and I took hard classes, you know, and I really challenged myself. I used my prison mentality. You know, it's how you look at it. It made me strong. So I broke my days up into 3 parts. I went to the gym. I was still working out. Went to the gym, went to school, and I studied. I went back into my bag, and it was all good. You know, and I just avoided the diversions.
Other questions or comments?
Thank you for all that. I'm a lawyer too, and I didn't have to work that hard, and I'm really grateful because I can't imagine fighting those battles as well as law school, which was bad enough. Have you read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow? Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. I'm going to be talking about it tomorrow. I think there's a panel that has the phrase, the new Jim Crow, ? In it tomorrow. And I really encourage everybody who's interested in any aspect of this work, these issues, to read it. Sheila asked about the stigma. And Michelle Alexander, who's a law professor and a longtime civil rights lawyer, proposes that what we have now is a new, essentially racial caste system in America, but we don't call it that. We call them felons. And nobody cares if you discriminate against felons, and nobody cares. In fact, it's illegal, it's constitutional to enslave people if they've been convicted of a crime. So I think that, you know, the things that we've heard tonight from you and from other people about the need to persevere and the individual strength needed but that can still make a difference is tremendously important, particularly because of that need for hope. And the families need hope, and all of us need hope. But I think we also need to look at what else we're up against. All those college programs gone that you were talking about, others were talking about. Why is that? And there are lots of reasons, some of them economic, some of them political. You may not agree with everything that Professor Alexander says in her book, but I suggest that it's a good thing to read and think about. And at the end, she says, how do we fix this? And she says it's going to take a mass movement. So that doesn't necessarily mean that all of us in this room are going to get up and walk out in the same march, you know, to D.C. tonight. But any work that we're doing, whether we are supporting somebody who's in prison with letters and packages that they wait for, or whether we're doing law, pitiful excuse as it often is, because the appellate courts are stingy. That was the best thing you said all night. You said a lot of great things, but appellate courts are stingy. That's absolutely right. We all can make a mass movement because Martin Luther King was an incredible human being, but he didn't multiply himself to make enough people to fill the mall in Washington, D.C. And we don't have to fill them all. Maybe we write and say to the governor, we need a clemency. We need a new way to deal with clemency. We talk to the legislature. We need a new way to deal with clemency. Or maybe, like the Prisoner Justice Network did, we march on the parole board and demand, they didn't come out and talk to us, demand that they stop resentencing people. There are lots of things to do, and I hope that we'll all be talking about it this weekend. Thank you so much for what you said. Thank those of you who have been in and who had the strength to talk to us about it, because that's got to be hard. And I hope lots of other people will comment. I'll shut up.
I don't need the microphone, I just wanted to say a quick thing, question. I do jail ministry, and I was just wondering if did anybody approach you when you were incarcerated from the outside to help you or to mentor you or give you inspiration when you were in jail?
No, I went to church, not religiously, not all the time, but I went. I mean, you know, they were there. It was there. Did I did. I studied. I read. I did study a lot of religious philosophy, just for my own sense of edification. So I'm. You know, was there ministry? Well, yeah, there was plenty of ministry, and again, I think that the religious teachings, and then the more enlightened you become through education, the more receptive you become to the Word of God, to good things. You know, and education helps you in so many parts of your life. It enriches the quality of your life. So you can apprehend and appreciate more of what you're being told when you have an education. I think that's the importance of it, to have a fulfilled life. Okay, thank you.